there will be models, there will be, coding models by that time, within 5-10 years, that completely outstrip what we're seeing today, right? So we're not going to code. 10 years or so, we're not going to be coding. We're going to do a lot less coding ourselves within the next 3 to 5 years. As a matter of fact, some would say, and for certain businesses, we're seeing a lot less coding today.
And today we are joined by Keith McFarlane. Really excited to have Keith. He is CTO of Globality. Thank you for joining us. We were talking, he's in Florida, so that's why we were talking about iguanas. So Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm really glad to be able to join you today. If you want to talk more about iguanas, great. If not, we can talk about whatever you want to hit.
As CTO, what do you think we need to do about the iguana issue
in 2026?
No,
coding.
Actually,
AI. Iguanas should be the ones shipping code.
Yeah. So again, being a CTO, I think a lot of people are checking in and they listen to this for a lot of things. If we tend to talk about, HR stuff, obviously we're a recruiting agency, but we also like to talk to leaders in technology, people like CTOs, because I think a lot of the people we work with and so on, these earlier stage engineers, they go, man, I want to be a CTO. How do I get there? I don't know if when you were 9 years old, you said, I want to be a CTO. So what was your path or your origin story to get to where you're at? I'll give some of the viewers a heads up. You former Microsoft and Oracle and so on, but within each of those, there was decisions made. Tell us a little bit about your origin.
Certainly. Well, I can tell you, you're absolutely right. I didn't come out of the gate thinking CTO at any given point. There was a point in time at which I decided that was the path I was on. But really, when I first started in tech, and that was with an internship at Microsoft, I was just trying to get my feet under me, trying to understand what it meant to be a part of that industry. And I'll tell you, the path that I've taken, the one I'll describe to you, is not going to be remotely similar, I think, to the path that a CTO will take starting right now in their career, because things have changed so much. But for my purposes, it was all about ingesting as much information as I could find, learning as much as I could. I remember, when I first started off at Microsoft, a lot of the time that I spent was with physical books. Physical, you remember those with the paper?
No, I'm not familiar. You're going to have to enlighten us on what is a book.
Indeed. So just reading, just tons of information about APIs, about the internals of Windows. There was a literal book called Windows Internals, and the Microsoft operating system stack, and learning how all that worked. I don't think anyone goes through that sort of thing anymore, but it was fairly standard practice back in the day. If you really wanted to get enough information under your belt to have an impact, you had to read and read and read and read. So I did a lot of that when I first started off. And then, I was fortunate enough to have an internship at Bell Labs, which is where I really cut my teeth in this, architecture and leadership space. So, I started off in the halls of that Denver Bell Labs facility, spent time at Murray Hill, actually brushed shoulders with Brian Kernahan at some point, which was a pretty amazing experience to talk about. He didn't know I existed, but I knew he existed. It was very cool. And then I moved on from there to architectural roles at a series of companies that came out of AT&T, right? So this is where you see big changes happen in business, but a lot of the foundation remains the same. So AT&T became Lucent. Lucent became Avaya, at least from my perspective, as these companies divested. And there came a point in time at which I had to decide, am I going to pursue the leadership path, or am I going to pursue the technical chain all the way to the top? Little did I know you could do a little bit of both. But at the time, the advice I was given by actually a mentor of mine, Pat Beatty, he was you can imagine the most grizzled project manager that you've ever seen. He was an amazing guy, really, really sharp, but also cynical. He told me, look, at some point you got to choose. You got to choose whether or not you're going to follow this technical path to its logical conclusion. You're just going to be an architect, kind of move in that direction, or you just want to be a manager. I knew that I didn't just, quote unquote, want to be a manager. Look, management's a skill. Management's a skill that you have to learn over time. And there are people who are pure managers who are really great at what they do, but I knew I didn't want to let go of technology. So I took a turn in my career where I did something that you don't often do, and that is I took a salary cut to go work at PeopleSoft. And that was a tough decision to make. That's not something that I had to stew on that for a while. But what I got out of that was my first actual technology management role in a tech stack that I had no prior knowledge of, something I didn't know. I had to really, really dig at, and I had to learn, how to motivate and how to organize people, and how to ensure that both from the people side and the organization side, the relationship was working. It was a good trade-off to make. It was a really good trade-off to make because I got to go back at that point, drawn back into the Avaya world, the Avaya experience, to work with the CTO and help to plan out some of their next moves. And then, I had the good fortune of meeting some of the folks at LiveOps and stayed there for 7 years building out cloud-based contact centers. That's where I really got a chance to, get exposure to and learn a lot about how the cloud works from a company that had begun using cloud technologies in, believe it or not, 2001. They built multi-tenant cloud services before anyone was saying the word cloud, which is great.
Yeah. So
learned a lot there. Then I got dragged into, not kicking and streaming, but I got pulled into the Oracle experience, which was just amazing for me in so many ways. Frustrating in some ways, but really great precursor to my work here at Globality. And that's sort of the long story.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like if somebody were looking at you or you were looking at yourself, like past version of yourself, and you were like, Keith, do you want to go the architect route or the CTO route in today's environment? So when I think about today, like in what today's environment looks like, because you mentioned something a second ago, which was, I think the path of a CTO might be different today than what it once was. And so how would you describe to someone if they were like in that position where it's like, maybe I'm going leadership or maybe I continue up the IC path? What would you say to that person as to the benefits of one versus the other and what the trade-offs are going to be? I would be curious as like today, somebody comes to you or your version of yourself comes to you today and says, here are your two paths. You've got the red pill and the blue pill. Which one do you want to take?
That's a really pertinent and insightful question, because I've asked myself that same question so many times, and I got two sons who are in the industry, or one in the industry, one about to be in some approximate engineering industry, and I've been trying to figure out different ways to approach this, both for the folks in my management care and for family. And I guess the way I think about it is this: there is a set of skills that you learn, for example, in a college experience, that should always be transferable. This critical thinking and insight, especially now today, but AI slop everywhere, right? You have to be able to think critically. It kind of goes back to encouraging that reading that I talked about, encouraging sort of words on a page and thinking and sitting and thinking about concepts and discussing concepts. This is one of the other things you get in a university experience, and it's not the only place to get it, but it's one place. It's a good place. But as far as how to approach this whole notion of the career path towards a CTO, is a CTO going to exist as they currently do today in the next 10, 15 years? I think that role will be completely modified. I think that someone like me will be more of a converged, technical product person, understanding the base technologies, but not, within 10 years having to deal with, sort of coding stuff just from bare principles, right? There will be models, there will be, coding models by that time, within 5-10 years, that completely outstrip what we're seeing today, right? So we're not going to code. 10 years or so, we're not going to be coding. We're going to do a lot less coding ourselves within the next 3 to 5 years. As a matter of fact, some would say, and for certain businesses, we're seeing a lot less coding today. For our business, we're certainly taking advantage of AI models to generate some of our code with care, obviously. There are new models come along that are going to allow us to rely on AI a lot more. So if I go back to the career transition, on the leadership side, you have to be looking over the horizon for that next set of technologies and how they're going to evolve, what it's going to affect in terms of the people that you hire, which really, when you hire people, you're going to have to look for folks that are less the technical sort of dig down people and more the folks that can bridge business requirements into something that is realized as software. I think that's the transition we're going to see over some period of time, and CTOs are going to have to play right along with that transition and understand that there's a difference in the people that you're going to need working for you.
So let's talk about that currently right now. So globality, are you guys in that process of you specifically as the CTO looking at the hiring process on the engineering and product team right now?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that.
Are you currently going through that? I'm in the hiring process, so I've got to be looking at engineers, product people, and so on today. And if so, what are you looking for that's different today than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
That's good. That's a good question. So, I have changed what I'm looking for. Not in a revolutionary way, but I've started to modify the skill set. Certainly we've always needed people with great insight and the ability to follow up on problems and the ability to stay with a train of thought, the ability to analyze deeply. But in the technology roles, in the coding roles, what I'm really looking for is, have you had experience or have you developed your own experience applying these new tools? Do you know what they can do? Do you know what their limitations are? And how much can you do beyond what you could do previously applying these tools? And there's also I think there's a threshold of belief here. I think there are folks who are never going to believe that an AI model can work at the level of the most proficient coder. And for now, that's probably true. But we're talking about the most proficient coders, right? The most proficient programmers.
Mm-hmm.
AI models today are certainly capable of operating at a junior level. And if you get them working in conjunction with each other, and you get them working as agents independently and over some period of time, and importantly, with the right layer of validation around them, they can do more and more and more and more interesting things. I applied an agent the other day to resolving a bug that I had, right? To something that I had to code up myself. I of course look over every line of code still because that's who I am. I'm very very paranoid about what I push out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But bottom line is, coding models are doing the job. They're doing a lot of the job. We're going to start trusting them more. So the people that we hire also need to have that that trust but verify feeling, right? That notion of, I'm going to let go a little bit and I'm going to allow the agent to code, but I'm going to make sure the structure is in place around that code such that I know that I'm not going to break things by taking advantage of this leap.
Yeah, I'd be curious. What do you think that means for the future of junior developers, though? Right. So if we're looking at it and going like the AI models today can act and ship as if it's a junior dev, I do see a lot of companies being reluctant or resistant into hiring early stage engineers right now because they're playing this balancing act of like cost versus viability versus utility versus the next 5-year investment, what that's going to look like. So I'm curious as how are you and your team approaching early engineering hires, and how does that play a part in your development stack as you compare it to some of the AI agents and the agentic coding tools that you've got today?
Yeah, I have hired a junior engineer recently, so I can and actually several junior engineers recently. I'll tell you why. These engineers are coming out of school with that set of reasoning skills that we talked about. And applying those alongside the coding tools makes them just as valuable as they would have been previously, and maybe more, right? And then they're going to look at the results of these coding tools. They're going to be able to apply them more effectively. They're going to learn over time from their seniors, right? I think it is a mistake to stop hiring junior developers right now. I think that you're still going to need that individual on the other side of the tools that is organizing the behaviors, that is overseeing the work, and you're going to need to build up that skill set from what you have in terms of your experienced developers as well, right? You need for the experience to transfer into some human set of minds as as the tools get better. Yeah, I don't think that we're at a point where we need to stop hiring junior developers. I think the junior developers need to be able to use the tools as effectively as senior developers in order to keep pace, certainly, but they get there over time.
Yeah, and I think it's an investment, right? It's an investment in the future. I'm assuming when you're bringing on a junior developer, you're looking at them going, today, for the next 2 weeks, I could get done with AI what you're going to end up doing for me. But as you learn and as you grow and as you use these models, you're going to develop arguably faster than a junior dev did 10 years ago. You should be able to develop much quicker because your time is a little bit less spent purely writing code, right? Does that sound accurate? Am I?
That does sound accurate. And in fact, it goes to that point I made earlier about, there's a this threshold of, do I think these tools actually can do the work? Or can they assist with the work? Can they make me faster? And I've seen this actually more on the senior side. I've seen, there are folks who just adopt the tools and just go to town with them, absolutely produce much more than they ever would have. And they acknowledge that. They see that the tools help them. They see that applying them in as much as possible gets them better at using the tools, gets them into the nooks and crannies of the environments and the agents, and makes them faster. Now, then there's a resistance in some quarters, right? There are developers who don't believe this. They believe that tools get in their way. And in the end, that I think is going to be the losing opinion. I believe that those senior developers who are embracing these tools are superhuman coders, and that resistance is not going to exist at the junior level, right? That resistance is irrelevant because the junior developers are coming up with these tools. They begin to understand how it is that you more optimally interact with them because they haven't ever seen an alternative. So I think it's true. I think it's true that junior developers will more quickly over time adapt to the way development is going to be done in the future.
So again, this has shifted, as you said, not revolutionary, but it has shifted your interview process, what you're looking for. So then I'm assuming over at Globality, you have an internal recruiting team. Maybe you work with third-party agencies as well. I don't know. Do you work with third-party agencies?
No. Actually, our internal recruiting team is pretty fantastic at finding these kinds of candidates. They have embraced this change in the world, and they're moving pretty quickly to get a good pipeline. I mean, that's not to say that we also couldn't take advantage of agencies over time, but at the moment we're doing pretty well.
So how have you shifted your connection with your internal team to go, hey, this is what I'm looking for. It's different today than it was 2 years ago. Here's what I need you to bring to me.
That is direct conversations with the head of HR and direct conversations with the HR staff. They are using, all of, they're using Greenhouse and all the familiar tools, many of them AI enhanced in their own way. And they're listening to us. And I think that's the critical thing is they're listening to us in the engineering discipline as to what's changing, what kind of person makes a good engineer long-term, what kind of experience and what kind of attitude is going to be successful. I think that all of those things play into it. But it starts with the conversation. It starts with the human conversation between me and the CHRO and our staffs to make sure that we're all aligned. What's great is that they listen to us. I have a great partner in the HR function, and she and I get along really well talking about these things.
Yeah. And where do you feel like you are all going at Globality in 2026? What do you imagine like the current horizon looks like?
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much on the product front. We of course are an AI first company, AI native company, so we are applying what we know internally to the product at all times. It's built on really solid AI fundamentals, and so we are, for example, coming to the table with more autonomous negotiation technologies. Coming to the table with, we're in the sourcing industry, so much more autonomous sourcing flows. But internally, the way we're thinking about things is like it was pretty standard for everyone at the end of 2025 to be able to claim that they ended up with a 30% or so boost, maybe a little bit more, from AI coding tools. We're using Cursor ourselves. So that was a standard statement. I've said the same thing myself. What I'm looking for in 2026 and what I think we can achieve is, sort of a 100%, sort of a doubling of capacity based on the proper application of these tools. And I think it has to do with where you apply them. It has to do with how much autonomy you can build into your delivery process, meaning, for certain kinds of bugs, for certain kinds of patches, for package updates. If I've got the right test structure, I should be able to give the coding agent a bit of free rein and then do a quick review and push code, right? So I want to get to that point. I don't know if I'll achieve that in 2026, but I believe it is within the realm of possibility based on what's happening in the market.
Yeah, and I'd be curious. So one of our clients the other day, they said one of like a disqualifying question for them because they are AI adopting. Everybody in the company uses it, and it's more or less like if you don't adopt AI tools in some way, whether it's using tools, LLMs to ship functions and or to help you produce code, whether it's a production environment or just like I'm building it myself. The question that they ask is like, "What's your AI setup?" And they leave it relatively open ended to just see like how are they actually interacting with these tools, what is their thought process behind how they're approaching these tools, and how thoughtful is it. So I guess one of the questions I'd have for you, because it sounds like you guys are very much so adopting and adopting at a very fast rate. What does your AI setup look like today?
Well, at the moment, we are, we're pretty deep into Cursor. Every engineer has both Cursor and we're using the Opus 4.5 model underneath. So we are, that's baseline for us. We've got we've access to other tools. For example, everyone's got access to ChatGPT 5.2, a corporate instance. We've got direct access to Microsoft Azure portal for experimentation. We support experiments with all the different model types. And beyond that, as a company who's, one of our three core values is innovation, we allow a level of free reign around trying new kinds of tools. Now, we do that, of course, in a secure way, and we do it with review. But for example, we started using Prompt Foo, which is the technology for evaluating the differences between prompts and whether or not a prompt itself is effective. We've been using LangFuse for some time for prompt tracing and prompt development, and a variety of other tools. We've got MCP connections, for example, model context protocol connections from our development tools, from our analytical agents in development into Grafana, so we can take a look at log results. So the tool set is getting pretty deep, and it's actually expanding over time. But we're expanding, I think, in intelligent ways, in those ways that speed us up rather than slow us down.
That's pretty awesome. I'm imagining in 3 years we ask you that same question, and like one of those 18 that you just mentioned is still being used. It's like it's amazing, because a year ago, I think if you didn't have probably OpenAI, ChatGPT on that list first and foremost, people would be like, "Oh, you're not using AI." It's like now that was like, "Oh yeah, I guess they sort of have ChatGPT," because there are so many new like tomorrow you're going to be like, "Oh, and now we just added this to our tool belt, and now we just added." It's like Used to be a hammer and a Phillips head, and now it's like, oh, now we got a lot more than just a hammer and a Phillips head. That's for sure.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And there's tools I didn't even mention. We're using something called Keyploy, which generates 10,000 integration tests a month. So it's like the tools just keep coming. They keep getting better. So we got to keep pace.
So here's the big question as we approach the end. You're big into AI. You guys are AI native. We like asking some of this to the people in technology. Is AI going to melt our eyeballs and take over the world in 10 years? Like what, obviously you hear that doomsday, on the Rogan podcast, and that's our main competitor is Rogan. It's Rogan and us pretty much.
Of course.
When they talk about, hey, this is the end. Like there is a 33% chance that AI will kill us. What do you see AI broader than just in the software space, how it interacts with our world? Do you see it being something that creates mass unemployment, kills us, etc.? Or do you see it, and what do you see making sure that doesn't happen?
It is a question of the day. I don't really subscribe to the Jeff Hinton school of sort of this is AI doom and destruction. Or the Terminator movies or any of that sort of stuff. It's all fun stuff to talk about, and it's great for conjecture. But to be frank, I think the real dangers are the ones emerging now, right? I mean, if we do not, for example, figure out how to manage a transition to a world where we just have to do less work, then you can have some societal impacts. I mean, in the end. I see some statements in the news around, you see articles every now and then that say something like, well, every technological evolution has resulted in the elimination of a certain class of jobs, but the creation of a new class of jobs.
Yep.
And I understand that to be true about previous evolutions of work, but I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see something somewhat different. I think that you'll see machines that are capable of taking jobs on that are not replaced. So I think there is a societal implication there. I don't think it's like in the next 3 years, but I think that we're going to have to solve something. I don't know if it's universal basic income or if it's, I don't have the answers. I can tell you that I see these technologies unceasingly improving. And whenever an intelligence technology unceasingly improves, there's no denying there will be an impact. There will be an impact on jobs and on society as a whole. So, how do we react to that? Well, we've got to we have to face the problem head on rather than ignoring it. At the moment, I think we're all, myself included. I mean, we're so excited about this. There's so much good here. There is so much that can be done. The technologies are so amazing that it's easy to race forward without thinking too hard. I think that's just something that happens with business. But I think at some point we're going to have to take stock, as a society, as cultures around the world, and determine what the next steps are for humanity itself as the tools continue to improve and take much of sort of the, let's call it, burden away.
Yeah, well, take that, Rogan. All right. So last couple of fun questions. These are binary questions, pretty simple. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Okay. Yeah, I like Android better, but I'm an iPhone user. That's just
Well, there are a lot of good reasons to like the Android ecosystem. I fell into a habit and I stuck with it. So I'll admit that much.
I got pushed into a habit because of my children. Green bubbles and blue bubbles. It mattered that much. Mac or PC?
We are a Mac shop. I've been a convert to Mac ever since I came on board at LiveOps. That was 10 years ago, much longer. Gotta learn math skills, I guess. And part of the reason for me was always that I could jump down into the operating system, do the things I needed to do. I wasn't worried about the fact that Mac tries to hide stuff from you. And I like the UI a lot. I like the tools a lot. When I was running PCs, I was usually running Linux on them. But those days for me are behind me. I like the Mac.
All right. Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Paramount, HBO, Peacock, or what's your favorite? What's your go-to?
Flip between a few, but most of the time, if I'm looking for something that I like, it's going to be on Amazon. So Prime. I'm going to say Prime.
Oh, I said it. I said Prime. Okay. Goodfellas or Godfather?
Oh, gotta go with the classics. Godfather.
I'm Goodfellas. Shane hasn't watched either.
I can't say that I've watched
really
either of
bad
them. So
TV and movies.
So look, I'm a Joe Pesci fan, but I gotta give a nod to
Raging Bull, Joe Pesci's finest. Raging Bull. Good classic movie. Shane has no idea what we're talking about at this point. He's totally lost. If he doesn't have dragons and Pokemon, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we talked about when I'm good.
Well, Keith, we really appreciate you joining us. A couple of requests for the viewers. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that normal stuff. If you are a founder, know a founder, if you're a leader, a CTO, executive in the technology space, and you want to come on and let us know if you are Goodfellas, Godfather, or don't watch movies. We'd love to have you on. DM us, message us. And for you, Keith, how can people get a hold of you if they have more questions or they want to join your team, which is growing and expanding? How do they reach you or your team?
I would say look me up on LinkedIn. I'm always amenable to connections, and just go to globality.com to learn more about what we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Keith. You make sure that any iguanas do not fall on your head. Well,
I'll keep looking up.
High 30s there in Florida. And hopefully we survive Snowmageddon here in Nashville. So everyone, goodbye.